for joining us for the second webinar in our Threat-Informed Defense series on purple teaming. Cyber threats pose significant risks to organizations worldwide, ranging from financial loss to reputational damage to even operational disruptions. These ever-evolving threats can be intimidating and they can be scary, but with the right preparation, organizations can proactively mitigate risks and fortify their overall cybersecurity posture. Our goal is that you walk away from this webinar feeling educated and empowered, understanding the fundamentals of planning and executing a purple team exercise, and the follow-up activities that could continuously improve your security operations and their capability. My name is Amelia Lewis. I'm the marketing specialist here at KirkpatrickPrice and your host for today's session. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. To ask any questions, please be sure and use our chat, and we'll review those during the Q&A at the end. And if you would like CPE credit for this webinar, please email hello@KirkpatrickPrice.com. and we'll send you a certificate. I believe, it should be on the screen right there. And finally, this session is being recorded and you'll receive the recording in your inbox later this week. I think that's everything housekeeping wise. So with that, I'm pleased and excited to introduce today's speakers, Jason and Mike. Jason Roland is a cybersecurity executive with over 20 years of experience leading the delivery of security programs and defense strategies, operational capabilities, and assessments. As VP of Penetration Testing at KirkpatrickPrice, Jason is focused on providing cyber solutions that support the success of his clients and participating in initiatives to strengthen our community. Jason is joined by our special guest, Mike Bonner. Mike is a seasoned expert. Hey, Mike. Mike is a seasoned expert with a 25-year track record in information security. Mike's strategic, which Jason, he looks like he's got you by about 5 years there. So
it's hard to understand.
His bio was older.
Mike's strategic leadership has fortified the digital defenses of various Fortune 500 companies across diverse sectors. He joined High Tech Network and Security Solutions in January of 2024. As their CISO, managing risks for their organization, as well as providing virtual CISO services, offering his wealth of knowledge and advisory services to Arizona's government entities. So welcome, Jason and Mike. I will give you guys the floor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amelia. Like Amelia said, Mike and I are going to be presenting. Actually, this is webinar 2 in a series of 3, and I think we'll be covering this at the end. We'll be covering. We'll have another one on threat hunting coming up in July, I believe. And today we're going to be talking purple teaming, and we want to just briefly go over some definitions, some loose definitions, and some of the benefits that are achieved by purple teaming. And then I want to spend the bulk of the time going through what is an approach, what are the steps for planning and preparation, gathering threat intelligence, and then executing the purple team. And we're going to cover some of the TTPs used by Akira, which is a ransomware that is moving up in the world as far as prevalence. So we look forward to kind of walking through some of the things that we learn about with a real example. So I'll just open it up and say, purple teaming, for anyone that doesn't know, I can't imagine that this isn't something that everyone's familiar with. I think the most important, aspects of kind of how we define a purple team is that it's collaborative. That's a given. It's also iterative, and iterative can, be in the course of a single purple team. We can try and retry kind of, TTPs or methods and improve, mitigations or improve analytics. So it can be iterative over the long term, over multiple engagements, or within an engagement. It's collaborative, it's multidisciplined, and the most important feature of it, in my opinion, is that it focuses on helping cyber defenders better understand how the investments that they've made and the processes that they have stand up to real world threats backed by threat intelligence. I don't know, Mike, you got anything to add there?
I actually do. So Jason, you kind of touched on it briefly, but from my side, on the blue team side, I want to focus on. You said it can be iterative. I highly recommend it be iterative. You should do it up front. So Jason's given a good rundown on what it is. You've got your red team and your blue team working together. You're validating controls, that the configuration is as you expect, that the risk management that you've done in understanding the threats and vulnerabilities that are facing your organization are appropriate. Those things change over time. I would highly recommend that if you're going to do this once, do it in a way that you can do it again and again and again and test different TTPs as you go through it, because things change over time. Nothing is more permanent than a temporary fix that somebody in the help desk put in, right?
Yeah. No, it's a great point. And I do think like there is, we all know when there's a data breach, people learn more about their network in the following weeks than they ever knew. Yeah. That's been a tried and true principle. I think, executing a purple team gives defenders a level of confidence in their ability to detect and defend these things that is unparalleled with anything other than suffering through one of those breaches and understanding how it works. And I think I also would say this can take a lot of different formats. Like, I think the one consistent theme is that it's driven by CTI. If it's not driven by threat intelligence, in my opinion, you're probably doing it wrong. There's a world of things that can be done. It's important to focus on those that we can validate have been done, because they're most likely the things that are going to come and pay us a visit. And I would say it could be CTI driven red team. It could be a CTI driven pen test or tabletop. Let me tell you, we'll talk about the planning process for a purple team. And I can tell you that once you've gotten through the planning process for a purple team, you're miles down the road compared to probably where you were if you've never done these exercises before. And then final thought on a red team side, I think the benefit that we get from delivering these engagements is it is very important for us to understand exactly how mitigations stand up to these attacks and exactly how analytics work in detecting them. It allows us to write better reports. It allows us to give clearer understanding, for all customers about how to defend and detect these types of events. So let's talk a little bit about the approach. So we'll go through a few steps that start with defining the objectives, which is certainly kind of, like I said earlier, it needs to be driven from CTI, and it needs to be, these exercises, there's some uplift involved with running these exercises. It's important that we put some thought into them and make sure that we're focused on the most important things, right? And then we have to take those objectives. We have to translate that into scope. This is where I think MITRE ATT&CK, a decade ago, kind of changed the game. It gives me and Mike a vernacular that we can speak to one another in that allows us to be on the same page with what we're talking about. I mean, it was certainly revolutionary. So we'll talk about how to use that, and then prepare to execute a purple team. There's obviously infrastructure to be stood up. There's decisions to be made on where this is done, and really all of this is done, in preparation for capturing the full value for the defenders of the purple team event. Anything there, Mike?
The only thing I would throw out is doing it before you have an incident is definitely preferable. From my end on the blue team side of coming in and being the one doing a lot of incident response for customers, I am typically running these types of scenarios after an incident happens, because part of what I'm going to do is, or part of what this whole program is I want to validate what controls are in place, because a customer can tell me, hey, I've done this, these settings are in place, but it's trust but verify. Like, you have to go out and do a validation, and doing those things before you have an event and then having someone come in and do that validation afterwards is it's so much more lightweight. It's a lot easier. You have time to respond. You have time to check and configure. Whereas if you're trying to get into identification and containment, you've got to move really quick and respond very quick.
Yeah. And I mean, and we'll talk about this. You know, there are many instances where controls don't work the way that, you know, we think they do in our heads, right? Or and that's true, obviously, for both mitigation controls and detective controls. Like, you can have them set up, but until you validated that they work against you know, an actual attack, it's almost academic, right?
Yep.
So, you know, how do we prioritize these events? And the last webinar that we did was on threat simulation, which is a service that we provide. And we talked about kind of, you know, there's, you know, the internal is where we should start. Like, I always think a great place to start is what has attacked you? Like let's start there, right? You know, and you know, talk to network admins, talk to the blue team, talk to your, you know, threat intel team if you have one. Talk to your MSSP if you have one. They should certainly be able to help you with this. You know, and that's where you want to start. And then I usually pivot from there. Let's go look at the latest CTI. And there is a lot of CTI out there. It is daunting. It can be daunting, but I think you know, there's some tips that we can provide of how do you get to the right place, and really kind of focus your efforts. And then I think, you know, in addition to that, and in reference to that CTI, you can select your purple team engagement based on areas that you know you need to improve, or areas that you're totally confident in. Like, you know, either one of those is a great place to start, right? So I don't know, anything to add there, Mike?
I mean, I can run down specific things that I do in helping prioritize for both myself and customers. We can touch on it a little later. Happy to do it here or there.
Yeah.
But one thing that I would throw out, because I do like to give specifically actionable information. When we speak about, in general, CTI, there's a lot of places you can go, as you called that out. One place that I really like to use is the DFIR report. It's the DFIRreport.com, or you can just Google for the DFIR report. They're basically like an open source group of folks who, after an incident, they get brought in, they do teardowns, they'll do PCAPs. And so if you're looking for a specific threat, and it's not guaranteed that they're going to have a report on one, but if you're looking at a specific threat, or you start looking through their reports and you're interested in something that you're seeing, and if your organization can be defended from it, look in that report. It'll give you all of the TTPs, all the IOCs. It'll tell you the flow that the attackers took through the infrastructure and what the outcomes were. In almost all of these examples, these are organizations that have been successfully compromised. So you have the full chain of events, and it also gives you some opportunity to see, hey, where could I have cut this off as we're going through this process? That's
right. That's a great point. Yeah, I would also point to, again, MITRE ATT&CK is not a bad place to start. Like, there's, you know, everything that they've got in there. There's threat intel tied to it. Some of it's dated, but again, as a starting place, it works well. Everything that CISA puts out, I found to be pretty rock solid. And the nice thing about CISA is they will cite any intel that they put out, and you can go and look at the actual reports.
So one additional thing to throw out is MITRE ATT&CK is incredibly popular. Everyone maps it in their SIEMs, in their CTI platforms. We talk about it on everything. What doesn't get as much attention, but is an equally fantastic product from MITRE, is the Defend framework, so D3FND.
Oh, yeah.
Which maps TTPs to controls. So if you're looking at, hey, what is the defense against this specific TTP? It does that mapping for you. It says, hey, you know, if you're worried about spear phishing, maybe you want to have email security. Maybe you want to have a SIEM that's looking at ML stuff, looking at email headers. Like, it'll give you all of the controls that apply to its specific TTP.
Does it actually use the word maybe, Mike? I'm curious about it.
They're a little bit more black and white.
That's great. And then I think we should also say, you know, there's things that we can ask the clients, like, what are acceptable, you know, and you should ask yourself, what are your unacceptable losses, right? Like, what are your unacceptable losses? And then what is the, you know, what would be an attacker's intent associated with those losses? and then what cyber activities would they have to undertake in order to make that happen. And that's usually going to map to some attack and TTPs as well. You can go validate that, but it's always a good place to start is, what are we nervous about?
Yeah. And Jason, to that point, Jason and I have actually had this conversation with customers in the past, where sometimes you go out and ask like, hey, where are your critical points of failure? What are you really worried about from your business? And to give you something actionable to go after, one thing that we have found to be helpful in the past is you probably have a BCDR plan, or business continuity disaster recovery. Somewhere in there, you have tier 0 apps, the things that are critical to your organization, the things you need to have fail over or make available. It's things that are the crown jewels to your organization. Starting with those items and talking to the people who own those applications are the best way to identify what's actually important to the organization. Because you can talk to somebody who just has a myopic view of their space, who has no idea that, this piece might go down, but if this app goes down, nothing works.
That's right. That's a great point. And then I do throw MITRE in here. This is just so everyone knows, this is from the folks at Title Cyber. They have a community edition that's totally free. I find it a little bit easier to present, certainly. But this is available to anyone. It's a great resource along with MITRE ATT&CK. The other thing that, we talked about, right, like really kind of, this does not have to be a full APT kind of start to finish exercise. This can, there's tremendous value in coming in and saying, we're going to test the relevant parts of lateral movement, right? Like I think more and more as, attack surfaces kind of explode, a lot of times lateral movement is your first opportunity, or maybe privilege escalation is your first opportunity to catch a bad guy in your network, because a lot of times they're coming in on infrastructure that the security team didn't even know about, right? So I think there's a lot of value in just testing lateral movement. I think there is plenty of value in testing a single technique. And we'll talk about some tools and things like that. This does not have to be a huge effort. This can be done, in small doses, and it provides a ton of value. Anything there, Mike?
No, I mean, I think the only thing that I would call out is just the shifting approach and the evolution in effectively what you're doing. I think this kind of harkens back. That's a weird word to use. Sorry. But, to the evolution of antivirus to EDR, where EDR changed the game, for a lot of the large EDR providers, where, hey, I'm not looking at every file. I'm looking at when files write. I'm looking at when files execute. And I'm looking at the handful of doors that you have to get into my house, right? I don't need to be looking at the large cinder block walls that I've got surrounding. No one's going to walk through there. So just focusing on those key places where I can stop or detect an attack. And what you're doing is you're extending this out to more than just EDR. So you can extend this out to like the logical configuration of systems, the interconnection between those systems. It is just an extension of what we're doing on endpoints.
And to your point, I mean, I was, in preparing for this, I was looking at, lateral movement's a great example, right? I mean, there are, there is still a huge need. I mean, EDR is great. And I mean, I don't suffer from the delusion that it's a silver bullet, but, there is still a huge need for, network monitoring, both in, content and just, flow, right? I mean, as well as, native OS monitoring. To be, to have a holistic solution, you can't put all your eggs in one basket, even if it is EDR, right?
Yep.
And then, once you've kind of once we've come up with kind of what our objectives are, it's important, like, if this is a big exercise, there's going to be a lot of people in the room, right? Or on the phone. There's going to be some red teamers. There's going to be some blue teamers. There might be some Intel folks. There will almost certainly be some network admins or system admins. And it's important, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail later, but it's important that everybody has an understanding of what are our objectives, and and what must we get done as a part of this test? Like, let's have some specifics that we want to get done, because I know, we get in a room together, Bonner, and we like sometimes to go sideways and maybe chase squirrels, and like this is not the time for that. It's like, we want to be focused on the objectives, and we've got to, someone, whoever kind of the coordinator is, someone's going to have to actively manage those and manage any variables associated with them. And if we can achieve those objectives, then we want to talk about, like, are there opportunities to innovate? Like, if, what do we want to try that we weren't able to try in our primary objectives, but we've got to make sure that we focus on getting those done. And this little document snippet here, I think I picked up directly from MITRE, but something like this, like, again, as a part of your tabletop, like, what action are we going to take, right? We should know, like, what is the TTP that we're going to test? What do we expect to occur? Like, let's get on the record with that. I think even that can be illuminating, right? Like, what do we expect to occur? And then as we go through the test, let's document what actually occurred. Maybe it's not exactly what we thought.
Yeah, and two, one of the first points you brought up about there might be a lot of people in this room. This is from my experience and my experience only. I would highly recommend starting small. For sure. Pick one set of TTPs, keep that limited, because just like your backup strategy, it's not going to work right the first time you do this. You're going to have evolutions that you go through as you discover, oh, this was turned off. Oh, this setting wasn't enabled because this person complained about it. Oh, we don't have visibility on this thing. And the worst time to do that is when the CIO or CFO is in the room overseeing this TTP because they want to be part of it.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that. Like, we can't get in the room and realize that no one's got accounts provisioned, for example. Like, that kind of stuff we're going to cover. And that's kind of the importance of the planning component of this, is you do need to think through it, because, again, depending on the size, to Mike's point, and we want to cover how you can do this in a very focused manner that doesn't require a lot of people. But should you be in a position where you feel like one of these is right for your organization, it's going to be, you're going to need to sell it to some people. This may be new to stakeholders outside of InfoSec, and it's important that if you're successful in doing so, that you have the planning put in place to make sure, give it every opportunity to succeed. And to that point, to your point, Mike, first of all, there's a couple of decisions that need to be made. Now, I have never personally done one of these, not in production. And like, I've never stood up a synthetic environment. There may be, I know that's what they do at Meta, because I watched a webinar they put on. They stand up totally synthetic environments. I don't know. I've never seen it, Mike. You?
This is very new. So in the past year or so, I have seen vendors who provide backup solutions, and as part of that backup solution, they have like these clean rooms that are almost like a component where they can spin up your infrastructure in these compartmentalized areas. I have seen people use some of those like clean rooms as a way to test tooling, to test failover, test other things. But that is something newer that I've seen, and it is because a backup solution is providing that for them.
Yeah. And then I would say there's a ton of there's a ton of resources out there, like, because at this point, the blue team really, we should be planned well enough where they've got a set of analytics that they think are going to defend this, right? Like, and there's a ton of resources out there. CAR is a repository that was put together by MITRE. I mean, most of the TTPs in MITRE, there are analytics out there that you can go and grab and alter them to what you need. Sigma is another one. Just a great resource. I think there's 3,000 analytics, all based on real CTI in Sigma. So there's great resources out there. And then on the red team side, the same thing is true. like nothing, nothing is better than having a red teamer that you can interact with and you can work with. But listen, there are simulation plans, both full simulation plans and micro simulation plans available on the Center for Threat Informed Defense GitHub site. And there's also tools like Caldera that, and again, I think BAS is a great idea. I think being able to quickly run, those type, be able to run essentially TTPs against your environment and make changes on the fly. I think this whole process should be integrated in with blue teams. And I think that's probably where we're heading. And maybe that's a great point, Mike, is like, what do you see the future? I really do see a time when there are going to be red teamers in most SOCs.
Oh, I mean, for sure. Admittedly, for my organization, I bring in third parties. And part of that is to be a really good red teamer, you have to live in that space kind of 24/7. And there has to be a back and forth. And like, I follow red team blogs. I follow, Anti-Siphon and BHIS's podcast. Like, I follow those feeds. But until you have a person that actually does it, it's different, right? Like what a red teamer sees and how they pivot and how they do NTLM relay and how they move through an environment, it's different than what a lot of people will just put out there. Or there's a lot of hand waving that takes place in some of those write-ups.
Yeah.
I would love to have red teamers on full time. It's just a matter of, where budget's going to sit.
And by the way, I'm also a big believer that the SOC is only one place where they can add a tremendous amount of value. Architectural discussions, control selection, to me, there is a place any modern security program, red team thinking should be at the center of it. I think it's a failing, that we've had as an industry, not to get more involved other than like once a year to execute a test. I think I do think that will change over time, but certainly we're not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, I can go on a red team rant if you'd like, but
yeah.
No, I mean, I have a lot of good friends that I count as red teamers, and the unfortunate reality of it is, and why I go third party, is that finding the people that are really good red teamers and not people who just know how to run a tool. And I mean that like from a pen testing tool, like, hey, I can run scripts or I can do a vuln scan, are rare. Like people who understand not just the technology, but the logistics behind an application, how systems might interconnect, places where there might be weaknesses. Those are rare people to find.
They are. And I'll tell you one more, and then to find them that are also consultative enough in nature to be able to, really drive conversations like architectural discussions can be challenging. And I'll just do a shameless plug real quick and say we've got that by the truckload here at KP. So, but yes, you're right. It's not always an easy skill set to find. And then, as we have kind of gone through and done some basic preparation, final checks, like Mike said, hey, is there connectivity between C2 and victim machine? Like, are the data sources actually online? Boy, we don't want to turn this exercise into, one where we didn't audit our data sources to see if they're ready to go. And, like red team infrastructure needs to be fully functional. Mike, you're probably validating that your tools are ready and humming just the way that you want them to, right?
Yeah, I would also like to throw this out because I've run into this scenario time after time after time. Do not give the red teamer that's coming in to help you something different than is normal in your environment.
Oh yeah.
Like if your boxes don't normally have even antivirus turned on, and you're not doing credential guard and app guard, you're not doing all those basic controls, but then you give the red teamer a box that has that and says, hey, start working with this. Don't do that. That's not helpful. That's not useful to your organization. Do something that's representative of the actual controls that you have.
Only if you want to get value out of the exercise.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Maybe you like throwing money away. So
yeah, that's exactly right. And that is a great point. Like it needs to be, if it, anything that you do needs to be a replica of what's actually in production. So you want to make sure that you've got all that stuff put together and you're ready for, all the technology's ready. And then you want to, when you kick it off, you want to introduce the key players. Again, this process in many cases can take place over, the planning process, a matter of weeks or even months. It's going to be a good time to re-level set on expectations, make sure everybody knows what success looks like, what the goals are. And then again, we're going to want to set some ground rules, just about how we conduct the overall exercise. Anything to add there, Mike?
No, I think you kind of covered it pretty well because I think we've touched on goals and expectations. I guess rules of engagement don't necessarily apply here because, we really do want to run through an entire scenario.
I'm glad you brought that up. For anybody that is wanting to participate in one of these, in adversary emulation, we talked about a set of documentation that needs to be in place before you launch TTPs on any network, even your own. I would just refer everyone back to that. Absolutely. By this point, we should have already gone through the process of getting all the permission that we need and all of those things. And I'll just, one last time, don't launch TTPs on your network without getting the appropriate permission.
Is that's something you've learned over time or life lesson?
I've worked with you for 20 years, Mike? Absolutely. All right. So then I thought, what would we do? We're just going to go through. We'll go through Akira. I know, Mike, you've ran this one down yourself. So I basically went and broke down a bunch of the threat intel from CISO on Akira. Couple things to note. They're financially motivated ransomware standard stuff, and a lot of their customers, most of their customers actually have been in like that, like 250 seats range, so 250 employees range. So these guys are coming after, smaller companies. They're very opportunistic in their approach, and something to take, something to be aware of for sure. And then I thought we'd talk through just a few of the TTPs. We're not going to get super deep into any of the technical aspects of it, although we do have some strategies for testing and detecting each one of these. So I thought we'd just go through. This isn't a complete list of the TTPs they use. It is kind of the highlight reel. So I would refer all of you guys to the CISA intelligence on Akira if you wanted to learn more and do a little bit more of a deep dive. But Mike, since you've been up against these guys, let's talk initial access. Maybe tell us what you've seen, and then we'll go through these TTPs.
Sure. So in general, I have dealt with these guys and in several customer environments, and they always get in the same way. It is organizations that don't have multi-factor enabled on their external remote access device. In particular, Akira likes to go after Cisco ASA, Cisco FTD. The reason they do that is there was, in particular, a bug in Cisco's platform where you could kind of nail up one session and then keep beating on authentications. You could just do constant brute forcing, credential stuffing, and it would never lock you out. So you basically had this one session into the device and you could just brute force all day until you finally found an account that works. And I kept seeing that across the board. So the definite heavy focus was on Cisco, but I have also seen them go after Palo. I've seen them go after Citrix. I've seen them go after Pulse Secure. I've seen them go after Fortinet. So they are across the board. Any place where there is some place where they can jam credentials in and they can determine that you don't have multi-factor authentication, they're going to target you. And to that point, when we were putting this together and thinking about what ransomware actor we wanted to pick or what APT, I wanted to pick someone like Akira because they're not sophisticated, and I'm not inviting anyone to come beat me up for that, but they are exploiting technical debt. It is things that organizations should have been doing. Is multi-factor sexy? No. It's sometimes a pain. Do you need it? Yes. If you don't have it, you need a time machine to go back to 2010 and put it into your infrastructure. Yeah, I mean, in 2024, it's just a requirement. So when you're looking at the TTP there, you need to be able to get logs out of whatever your edge devices are for remote access. So be it Citrix, be it VPN, be it whatever it is, make sure that you have logs and you are tracking at least anomalies in the count of like failed logins or even successful logins that you're seeing from. It could be one IP or a range of IPs. Sometimes you want to look at them in aggregate. One thing that's really good for this is machine learning jobs. So depending on the SIEM platform of choice that you might have, almost all of them in one shape or form will have machine learning jobs that you can look at where your influencers are like the usernames and the IP addresses, and then, success and failure criteria, and they can build trends over time and call out, right or wrong, if this is a legitimate user or not, this is anomalous, and it gives you something to go track down. Additionally, I would highly recommend going out and validating what your edge looks like. Jason, I think we talked briefly prior to this call about attack surface management. So going out and validating your endpoint. Something Jason and I have done in incidents in the past was, we had one customer who had an incident, brought us in, wanted us to deploy MFA to their VPNs, told us they had 3. When we went ahead and did external attack surface mapping, we came back with 22 different VPN termination points around the globe. So, the question became, okay, well, which 3 do you know about? So understand what you're trying to defend. Not to pivot on direction, but I'm sure a lot of people in here are familiar with the CIS framework. If you look at the CIS framework, the top 3 controls you can put in place all have to do with asset management, your hardware, your software, and your data. Do you know what you are trying to defend? And that is critically important in trying to line up what your external attack surface might look like.
Yeah, that's great commentary, Mike. And then, the other thing I would say is, I think one of the vulnerabilities that they were exploiting from Cisco was a CVSS 7.5, and there was a fix for it in 2020, I think.
Correct. Yep.
Right. And I believe that was an information disclosure vulnerability, and the information that is disclosed was credentials. So if someone was logged in, if someone logged into the VPN, very quickly you could see, an adversary making a connection, dumping and getting their credentials out of the VPN concentrator. So that was one. And then they had the other one that just came out in 23 that was allowing people to brute force without being flagged or locked out. But I think your point on monitoring is, very, is absolutely true. Like, there's going to be failed logouts. There shouldn't be 1,000. Like, if someone's brute forcing your network, you should know about it. And then, to your point earlier, a lot of the attacks now, the initial access is being gained through infrastructure that never had a chance to defend against the attack because the security team doesn't know about it. And I do think that just illuminates the importance of, continuously monitoring the outside infrastructure of your network to make sure that someone hasn't put something on there inadvertently and not told you, or on purpose and not told the security team, because that is a lot of times how this stuff happens. And then it turns out that once they're in, then you start getting your first chance to defend these things because they came in through something that you never secured.
And then the opportunity to do a shameless plug. Jason, is that something KP does?
Absolutely. We're happy to continuously take a look at your external infrastructure. And then the other thing I'll say is, prioritize your external vulnerabilities. Like, I get it. People can't get to everything. And I'm not one that would say, your environment needs to be cleaned. I mean, 25,000 CVEs were released last year. I don't know if it's possible. I've never seen it. I can tell you in my career, I've seen a lot of attempts, but I've never seen it. But at a minimum, like if you're going to prioritize some things, the outside infrastructure that's connected to the internet should probably be one of those things that you make sure you keep cleaned up and keep tabs on. Would you agree with that, Mike?
100%.
Yeah.
I don't remember who originally said this term, but I have used it since, that ransomware actors are technical debt collectors.
That's right. Yeah, it's a great point. So I think we've covered, dual factor authentication.
Yep.
Obviously critical.
Yep.
Obviously. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you don't have MFA, you've probably already had your first incident. But then kind of moving into credential access, there are a few different ways to detect and prevent somebody from reading LSAS. So for anyone that's not familiar, I'd imagine a lot of people are, but just to give a quick primer. So the LSAS is the local security application for Windows, because one thing that Windows has always done is be backwards compatible. And to do that, to do effectively single sign-on to applications, your password gets stored in memory. That gets stored in the LSAS process. And so if you take a dump of it, you get the user's password along with any credentials that are cached on that device. So what we would see with Akira is they'd get onto a box. Typically, they'd enumerate the network. So they're going to look for boxes that they can log into. Sometimes it's Bloodhound. Sometimes it's just straight Nmap, just looking for services they can access. Sometimes it's custom tooling, but then it's logging into those boxes and then dumping all the credentials they can with LSAS. And then typically, they will pivot off of whatever credentials they have. If you're not familiar with applications like Bloodhound, what Bloodhound does is it enumerates your environment, and it brings in the users and their permissions, puts it into a graph database, and then helps you map how to move from any particular user to another user or domain admin. We use it on the blue team. They use it on the red team. It's a fantastic tool for mapping out an environment and figuring how to get to privilege access. How to defend against LSAS? Most EDR platforms will defend it. Microsoft has some built-in functions now in the modern operating system with Credential Guard. It'll prevent the dumping of the LSAS process. I'm sure there's workarounds to that. I haven't seen that. But if you have EDR, you're probably in luck. Other than that, you probably need something like Sysmon with an appropriate configuration to track processes and understand when something is trying to dump from that process.
Yeah, you would need, and in this case, they used the Run DLL 32 and did a mini dump. If you didn't have EDR, if your EDR did not, does not detect that, which it should, you would need to do, I think, process monitoring, definitely, and then also command line, right? Because you would need to, you would, if you wanted to see how they were doing it, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts there, Mike?
I mean, I have an example of how this entire process went end to end, but I figure I'll save it to the end and then take people through the entire flow.
Totally. Okay. So let's talk about discovery. This one is, in this particular instance, they did use a couple of free scanners. They used advanced IP scanner, which, by the way, I'd never heard of, Mike, until I went and looked them up. And then they used just native tools, right? Which is what we expect in a lot of these incidents. I mean, easy to replicate from a red team perspective. It can be difficult to defend, though, right? I mean, it almost impossible to mitigate, but can be tough to even detect.
Yep.
How would you approach detecting those kinds of TTPs?
So you have two options. You can run, and this is the worst option. You can run Sysmon, where you're process dumping and then ingesting that into some type of solution where you're doing log normalization, parsing, aggregation, correlation, or you have an EDR solution. Not all EDR solutions are created equal, but some of the top tier ones will have behavior-based analytics. And what they're looking at is when somebody touches a lull bin, Well, it looks like, hey, what is the source? What is it touching? What's it attempting to modify? What function in that DLL is it attempting to execute, and against what destination? The top two players in the space, I don't think I should mention names, but they do a fantastic job.
Yeah. Even with just net commands, like
oh yeah. Yeah,
really?
if somebody's doing NL test, if somebody's doing net user, net query, all of those things get flagged because what they're doing is they're looking for trends over time. And you can either do that in your EDR solution. A lot of them will do that natively, or you can ingest that data into a SIEM and then use ML jobs to look for people running abnormal commands, right? Somebody who's running who am I NL test for the first time ever. It's weird. Like, that's something that should be investigated.
Yeah. And I think that's the key right there. There's a handful of people really that you know should probably be running these tools with any kind of regularity. And the trick is that you have to capture kind of the the outliers, right, when they occur. That's right. And then they and then RDP. And I think I mentioned to you, I read in one report where between the time of initial access and the actual exfiltration, they RDP'd to boxes 100 times. So let me ask you, Mike, would an analytic pick that up if it was properly configured?
Your technology there for picking that up is typically going to be an NDR or something that can aggregate across boxes. So if you are logging from every endpoint, so you're taking Sysmon or you're doing Windows Event Collection, Windows Event Forwarding into a SIEM, that seems probably massive because you're probably taking in a ton of data. You can run analytics across that and look for when people have abnormal levels of connections. If you have an NDR solution, which is network detection and response, various platforms that do that, they typically run off of either a span or NetFlow, and they will do really good trends over time of what is normal and what is abnormal. And I have actually been in environments where, shout out to Cisco StealthWatch. It's actually a pretty good product. What StealthWatch did is it watched this attacker get access to an environment and then connect to 100,000 devices and basically went, nope, no, that's weird. You should look at that. But then again, you also need someone to get those alerts and somebody to follow up.
So and I just want to touch on one thing. Like, all these TTPs in a purple team, what we're doing is, based on the intelligence, I've got the commands, I've got the the specific procedures that were used. I'm running them. I'm looking at Mike and saying, I know you didn't stop that, but did you see it? Or, hey, you stopped that, right? And we're just kind of iterating through the TTPs that we selected. And then before we move on, and it's 48 after the hour, FYI, Mike. But before we move on, I do want to touch on a little bit on just in general lateral movement. Let's talk about it because I do think it is one of the. I feel like there's a lot of places that are weak in their ability to detect and mitigate lateral movement, and I do think that it's one of the. It's kind of like one of the last stops before things get super hairy. Like, what are just some overall, in general, advice or some advice you would give to folks about limiting an adversary's ability to bounce around their network?
So that's a little tough. I think my focus there is more on detection rather than protection.
Yeah, for sure.
And along those lines, NDR solutions, there are commercial versions just to do shout outs to, Corelight, StealthWatch, Extra Hop. Like, these are vendors that ingest data and can find weird stuff. Yeah. There's also open source versions like Zeek. You can run it on, on span ports. You can ingest NetFlow. One of the beautiful things about something like Zeek is, on top of just normal lateral movement and being able to track that over time and doing a detection, is Zeek actually has something called the weird file, which is, hey, this is weird on your network.
Yeah.
And I've seen a ton of incidents kick off based on data we saw in that weird file.
Yeah.
So looking at that east-west traffic, even for people who have those tools in place, who have NDRs, I tend to see them not actually leverage it, because it does take an effort, a level of effort to install and tune, and then some smaller level of effort to maintain. And because of that, not a lot of people like to maintain it. But the value you get from that NDR, especially if you think something happened, being able to track everything east-west, unparalleled.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I've seen a lot of them. They seem to be one of those technologies that there's not enough attention paid to, and I think purple teaming is a perfect opportunity to kind of get people's eyes on the value that they can bring to an organization, especially if you've already got one, right?
Yep.
Like, and if you don't, that's a problem. Okay, and then we get into kind of the final stages of this thing, or at least the last three techniques we're going to cover, and AnyDesk, WinRAR, rClone, and Mega. I mean, that's the story, right?
Yep.
So, I'm assuming that the tools used were not setting on all of the victims' PCs, so we can probably just talk a little bit about, like, they bring in tools. What are we doing to stop that?
So I think it's the same EDR or Sysmon solution. So whether you want to do protection or detection, even some of the basic antivirus packages will do detection of those RMM tools. So typically, what you want to do is whatever your organization uses for RMM today, you can allow list that tool, and then blacklist or deny list everything else.
Right.
And so I have found instances where attackers come in and whatever you use as your RMM solution, they are going to use as their RMM solution. So they'll rip out your version of TeamViewer or ConnectWise or whatever it is and install their own.
Just like they use your VPN to work remotely, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. And then the same thing goes into, you'll typically see WinRAR. Anytime I see 7-zip in an environment, it's either an admin or a bad guy. Yeah. So you start looking for those tools. Again, you can find that with Sysmon processes logging, or you can find that with an EDR solution. Instances of those archives are definite big red flags. Kind of depends on the file names and what they're archiving, but and then connections out to running rClone. Robocopy, going out to Mega, going out to large file sharing sites. It happens every time. It looks the same over and over and over again. It's a playbook that works.
Specifically if it's ransom, and if it's a double ransom, cannot work if they can't get the data out. And I think that is, everyone I've ever seen, it's like, oh yeah, we let that out to everyone, and it's or FTP outbound or SSH outbound or whatever the case may be. I think it's an opportunity to lock your environment down with a proxy, or even in some cases a firewall. Mm-hmm. And we seem to be way better at stopping packets from coming in than we are policing the ones that are going out.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay, so a couple more slides. We've gone through the purple team. I've thrown commands at Mike. Mike has tested his analytics. We should have documented that. We should understand what gaps in our defenses are. By the way, I will make a comment here. Mandiant came out with a report, I think I read it last year, that said the overwhelming number of decision makers in cybersecurity did not have a great understanding of what the threats associated with their organization were. And I would just say, again, we should know that. And again, this is where I think red teamers playing a bigger role in every organization should come in. That should be a part of the calculus of what we invest in, from security infrastructure and people and process, the whole 9 yards. I'm not so sure we're there today. I think, again, like I said, it's a factor of like focusing. We know we can't do it all. Let's make sure that we're covering those areas that are likely to be exploited. So I think we should have a clear understanding of that, and we should be able to go back to stakeholders and decision makers and business partners and say, listen, this is a gap. And it's not only a gap because it's security best practice, it's a gap because, Akira uses this. They target organizations like us. And today we can't stop it and we can't see it. Like, that's compelling to go and get the right kind of investment for a security program. And then you want to have action items. And obviously you want everybody to get feedback that participated in it, because you're probably going to want to do these things, to Mike's point, when we started, on a very regular basis. And then I know we're running out of time, but I'll just say, and then you act on the results, deploy the mitigations, operationalize analytics, you may have to deploy data sources or new sensors, and certainly possibly update your process documentation, because process failures are a real thing as well. I think that brings us to the end. Amelia, if you want to grab any questions that we've got.
Yeah, of course. Thank y'all so much. I loved that. I definitely can tell the dynamic between you two, that you've both been working in this for a long time and that you've been working with each other for a long time. It was great to kind of get an inside look to that. It was fun. So thank y'all. All right. So this is your last reminder to drop questions if you have any. And if we don't get to them and you still have some later, we have a chance for you to ask those later, and I'll mention that and plug in the link. But we have a few here to get started. So it looks like the first one is from John, and he asked, what is a good solution for MFA for service accounts in a hybrid Active Directory, as well hybrid Active Directory, Azure Active Directory?
Yeah, Mike, I'll let you take that one. I don't know. I don't know that I've seen it, Mike.
Well, so I guess the question back would have to be, do you actually need MFA for a service account? Like, is this an account that is a service that somebody is logging in with?
Yeah.
Because Microsoft's solution to that is the group managed service accounts, where you basically take the password out of user control and just let it run as basically the server itself when you're setting it up. GMSAs, granted, do not work with every application, but that's the direction Microsoft wants you to go. Yeah. If it is a service account that somebody is going to be using and logging into, one, you probably want to review what you're using that service account for.
Yeah. And you wouldn't be able to accomplish it, because in order to have a second factor of authentication, someone would have to man that authentication session or when they authenticated. If you got people logging in with service accounts, it doesn't need, you need to separate those two for sure.
Yeah.
Perfect. And John, if you need more on that, definitely reach out to us and we can help you further if you need some more explanation. So the next one is pretty simple, but how often should you be performing a purple team?
I think, you should attempt to get to a place where you're doing this operationally at some point. And that doesn't mean everyone is, everybody from, everyone that was involved is involved in a large exercise. But listen, a new threat comes out. You should be able, you should work to have the ability to test that, put your analytics in, test your analytics, test your defenses kind of on the fly. I think there is a ton of value into having a regular pen test or purple team exercise where you bring in red teamers. And I think the amount, the cadence of that is just really dependent on your organization and your maturity level. But this should be something that's baked into the cake of security operations.
Nice.
And there's that element of doing it operationally to be able to respond to specific events, but I think there is actually value in validating that your controls are the way you have them expected. I cannot tell you how many incidents I've worked where somebody thinks something is configured a certain way and it's not, but they don't find out until an incident pops off. And that needs to shift left. That needs to be earlier in the process where you discover it yourself first.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, let's get one more in before we wrap all this up. So Logan asked, are most endpoint management solutions / IDRs sufficient for detecting data? Oh, hold on. Just popped up. Data exfiltration like that, which would be found in a ransomware attack. Did you get that? If you need me to read it, I can.
So it depends how you have them set up. So most EDR solutions are not going to trigger on the volume of data. They may trigger based on the destination domain or the command that someone's running. So like if someone does a robocopy or an rclone in an environment, most EDR solutions will pop off and say, hey, this might be attempted data exfiltration.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can be if somebody is attempting to zip or RAR very large amounts of files.
That's what I was going to say. If you RAR a certain amount of files, EDRs will usually raise a hand, but they won't stop it from going out the front door. I think is the answer there. That it takes network-based technology most likely.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, I'm going to do one more just because it's a really good question and I want to make sure that we get them answered. So Stephen asked, you mentioned NDR several times. What is your opinion of its importance in the InfoSec technical tool / layered defense stack? We have EDR, MDR, I don't know, expertise management, identity and ad hygiene tools, but I'm trying to reinforce the need and value of NDR to our CTO over just north-south IDS.
I actually have a great answer, but it's going to take me a few minutes. Can we go over a little?
Yeah, we definitely can. I mean, that's why people are here, is to get this value.
So one thing I wanted to do was go through the scenario with Akira, but we ran a little short on time. But high level, what happened is Akira managed to brute force a VPN in an organization of about 100,000 assets. They actually have a really good InfoSec team. They're pretty robust. They had things locked down. What happened is somebody was able to VPN in. They were able to join something to Active Directory. They were able to then enumerate the domain. They were able to enumerate the network. They got a foothold and then were connecting to everything in the environment. They had 100,000 endpoints. They had about 96,000 in their EDR solution. So once they realized they had an incident, one of the challenges was, okay, well, now I need to find them on the network. And the only thing that helped us do that was NDR. Because once you look at the NDR and you're looking at flows on the network, it was obvious where they had a foothold. And just to kind of go back, that organization actually had a really good security program. They thought no users had access to VPN other than a handful of people in IT. But at some point in time, somebody changed the default state for a group. So all of a sudden, all users were able to log in. Users weren't able to join things to the domain when they originally configured it. But over time, somebody added a group that had delegated access of all users. So now all of a sudden, somebody was able to join. EDR was supposed to be on all the endpoints. But what happened is, somebody on the IT side decided, hey, all of our SCCM distribution points, we don't want to have EDR on that because we don't want to take the chance of breaking patching. So it gave them this huge avenue of places to hide on the network. And when you're trying to find one bad guy in 100,000 endpoints, it's really hard if you can't see what's moving laterally.
Yeah, and that nailed it. But I'll just say also, like, this is why understanding attack paths are important. Is, none of us are right 100% of the time on any solution that we put in place. And, that's why it's important that we have EDR, but we also have network monitoring, right? Because again, like we talked about earlier, lateral movement, that's really like, one of the last places before, they start collecting data. Being able to detect that is important. And you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And that's certainly, I think there's a lot of value. And even with the RDP and the exfiltration we talked about, that's network content, that's network connections. There's things on the network that will key you into something bad that something bad is happening. So it is important. It is important to have that defense in depth, because there's always a story like the one Mike told. There's always, someone in IT that had a laptop without EDR, or someone that changed configuration on something that was facing the internet, and you want to make sure that you have some depth in your ability to detect and defend against these attacks.
Awesome. those were some really great questions. Thank you guys for dropping those. And it's still not too late. If you have questions or comments about all of this, Chandler looks like he dropped a link there, but we'd like to encourage you to keep the conversation around threat simulation going. You can do that by connecting with one of our experts here at KP, or by following the link to our most recent LinkedIn post. That link is pinned. Get on there and engage with us. Or if you want to unpack this conversation even further, we'd love to come and speak with your organization. And you can do that by connecting with us at hello@KirkpatrickPrice.com to get started. And also that's the same email that you can get your CPE credit from as well. So we want to walk alongside you as you work to fortify your security defenses. I know we're a little bit over, but I want to also remind you about the next part of our 3-part series with Jason. He will host a conversation around threat hunting come July. He will be joined, hopefully, he's doing some scouting right now, by another well-seasoned vet in the area of cyber. So be sure to be on the lookout for those invites, and please be sure to join us as we continue this conversation. We look forward to seeing you guys there. I think that's everything for today. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate your time and your expertise. And thank you all for attending. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, all.